You have to come to the music yourself gradually. Not everything must be received with open arms. This is a quote from Coltrane himself, referring to his masterpiece, A Love Supreme, and I could not agree more. Not only could I not agree more about this album, but I feel for me, this is how John Coltrane's music in general has come to me. And it's odd because I've gotten into a lot of jazz artists that aren't just straight jazz or bebop. Some refer to it as avant-garde or modal or free jazz. And it's interesting to come to this album the way that I have and where my musical journey is at the moment. It's also interesting because I feel like when this came out, a lot of people thought this was really out there or this type of music was really out there when in reality, it's not that far out there. I got the new UHQR, A Love Supreme from John Coltrane, 45 RPM, and a couple things to note here. I will try and be analytical about as much of this as I can. I really want to try and bring a little something different here for a UHQR review, and that comes in with the fact that I am not as familiar with John Coltrane as I am with some other jazz artists. I know it's crazy and it's stupid, admittedly, on my part, but I came to jazz from rock and funk first, so I gravitate to jazz, funk, or soul jazz, and for some reason Coltrane has intimidated me to get into, and I'm just being honest here. There's always this aura that comes over me when I'm talking jazz or playing jazz and then someone mentions John Coltrane, and in my mind it's like the record stops and the man is just staring at me, and I have this feeling like he is jazz and this is jazz and I don't even understand what this is and I shouldn't even be here. And it's odd because I don't feel this way with any other jazz artist. Like Herbie Hancock is my favorite jazz artist and I can go all the way back with him or any record that he plays. And even with records that Coltrane plays on, like as another guy on another record, it doesn't intimidate me the way that his solo records do when he's in control. And I think another reason that Coltrane's not more known to me is probably because he died in 1967, right before Miles took off with the electric stuff. And had he been part of that scene, he probably would have transcended jazz a little further along with Miles, and I probably would have been more familiar with him because of that, and maybe just gotten more into his music. Could you imagine for a second Miles Davis and John Coltrane, and most likely I read an article one time that Jimi Hendrix probably would have just started playing with them. Could you imagine if the three of them would have been playing together in the early 70s? Like, that would have been just absolutely ridiculous. And it's not just that his music is so far out there. I think it's always been this album in particular, A Love Supreme, that I always felt that I wasn't particularly ready for. And to be honest, I'm glad that I've waited until now and this UHQR version comes out. So let's talk about the facts of this a little bit. This is the John Coltrane A Love Supreme 45 RPM UHQR from Analog Productions, cut by Ryan K. Smith and pressed at Quality Record Pressings. When you get these UHQR records, they come in these brown, old school looking library boxes with wooden spines. Some people don't like these or they think that they're dated, but I personally love the aesthetic and I think that it's really awesome. And each of them comes with this certificate of authenticity, letting you know how many are in the set and indicating that it's been created using Clarity vinyl, which is this clear special blend of vinyl that comes out looking like this milky clear translucent. It's not completely clear translucent. And this is apparently the vinyl before the black additive is added, so it's supposed to make it sound that much better. For the cover, you get a glossy Stoughton hardcover gatefold jacket that's numbered and meticulously created from the original. There's also a listening notes with this one as well, and this one has some really great pictures, and they show the master tapes in this as well. Now, by the way, the master tapes that they used for this actually come from a flat tape copy used from Rudy Van Gelder for cutting in the UK. So that copy had been left unplayed from 1965 to 2002. So according to Acoustic Sounds, this was a better version to use since it had less wear. So it's not technically the original master tape. Apparently the original master tape is damaged, and so you get some channel drop off on certain channels. And apparently there are versions of the record out there that you can get with that, but I don't really know why you would want that. This one is cut with 2 LPs at 45 RPM, so with this record we get 1 song per side. And cutting at 45 RPM gives a lot more information from the record, since there's actually a lot more grooves and more detail to be heard. Personally, every record that I own that's cut at 45 RPM is amazing, and I wish more places did it a little bit more, even just offering different options for that. Now, I've gone back and forth about making videos about all these UHQR records. I've made videos about the Miles Davis 45 RPM and the Bob Marley Rastaman Vibration, version, and I hesitated on making ones for the others, especially the Exodus, because not everyone got a chance to get it. And so I didn't want to come across as gloating or flexing, since it's very hard to get one of those, or at least they're very expensive. However, I've watched a few different reviews on this one, and I will continue to as people make them, and two of them really stood out to me. The first from Felipe from the Jazz Bums. Go sub their channel. They have great jazz recommendations and they're really nice guys. Plus, they get great interviews as well with people like Kevin Gray, which is just awesome. Felipe did a very good, succinct breakdown of this, comparing it to an original copy as well as the Analog Productions 33, which is also cut from Ryan K. Smith. The second review that I watched was from Kenny's Audiophile Record Reviews, another great channel that I just recently found because of this UHQR looking for reviews. He offers some great comparisons to the SA CD and a high-res digital as well as the Analog Productions. And I mention these two because you should definitely hear this, vinyl video creators. You inspire people to make more content. Watching both of these videos, it made me realize when something like this comes along and you get 10,000 copies of this version of what could be the greatest pressing of one of the greatest jazz records of all time, and a lot of us go out and get it, it's good to have all of these reviews out there, whether they're good or bad. It's not scientific in any way, but it's almost like a peer review. You get a good consensus from people that have been building an audience and usually have a pretty good setup. Mine is probably the worst setup compared to those other two guys. And to do that here on YouTube, to carry an audience, you have to be a little bit authentic, or at least you have to have some knowledge. And I think both of these channels do. So hearing Felipe and Kenny's reviews really gave me some great insights into what I'm hearing on my record, and I'm going to attempt to share those with you now. So A Love Supreme has also been a classic record that I've not indulged in as much as I should have. Again, admittedly, this is a huge mistake, just like me not listening to Coltrane enough, but so what? I'm a little bit older now and my ears are a little bit more in tune, I think. Though I do have hearing loss in this ear a little bit, my record setup is better than it's ever been, so this is the time to explore this music, and for me, this was definitely the pressing to get. And I find it interesting too, in the liner notes for this set, they actually refer to John McLaughlin, Carlos Santana, and saxophonist Kenny Garrett as needing to hear this album multiple times the first time they heard it just to get it. And I'm not on any of their levels, but I can relate to that. And then in the liner notes, they go on to quote John Coltrane himself, saying the quote that you heard to open this video: "You have to come to the music yourself gradually. Not everything must be received with open arms." And that's, again, exactly how I feel about this. I did have a previous pressing of this album from Walmart on blue vinyl that I got for like $10, which was down from $26, which was just a steal, so that's why I got it. And this is not actually a bad sounding record. Has a nice gatefold, and apparently Target did one on these too, and it's orange vinyl, which is probably better to have since it's impulse orange. But these are apparently cut from the same metal as the Analog Productions 33, which gets really, really good reviews. These are not pressed at QRP, so you might have a hit or miss opportunity if you find one of these, but I listened to this before and thought that it was good. You know, like I listened to the album and it didn't grab me, but it was a fine record. That was at least my experience when listening to that pressing. When I listened to this new 45 UHQR, to use the old cliche, the sound of this just jumps off of my stereo, and a lot of that has to do with how it's recorded in the first place, with the saxophone panned hard left and the drums panned hard right. It really opens up the stereo sound a lot, but it did not feel like that on the blue 33 that I previously listened to. This is one of the biggest sounding records that I own, with only 4 people playing on it. It sounds like they are many, many feet outside of the speakers of my system, and it is amazing. If you're a drummer, you need to buy this record, this version. The cymbal clarity and the stick click is so present and it sounds amazing. Kenny's review said the same thing. The drums are so present and so live. The ride cymbal has so much definition that it's really, really, really well done. The opening track, when the sax comes in, comes screaming. It's really in your face, but it's not just overbearing. This is a great record and great production. Again, I can't speak enough to the drumming on this record. Elvin Jones is one of my favorite all-time drummers, and when I was thinking about things to write about this version of this record, the best thing I can say is that I just wanted to keep listening to it. I've listened to it over and over again. It sounds so live when the drums solo before the bass solos in the third track. It feels like I'm at a live show in the room, and I know that's what a lot of people say all the time, especially when they're trying to talk talk about audiophile records, but I keep experiencing it. And I've listened to this numerous times now, and each time it is just fantastic. The pressing of this for me was flawless, both records. There are some small ticks before the music starts, but no ticks at all during the music. And the bass solo is flawless on my copy, which is great because it's really, really soft. And if you crank the stereo to listen to it, there's just no noise at all on this record. And I had an issue with Warped Records for the Miles 45 edition, but since then, all of my UHQRs have been dead flat and silent, and that includes both Bob Marley's and the Can't Buy a Thrill, and now this. So all of these have been perfect copies, so they're getting a lot better at the quality and the quality control of these coming out, at least for me anyway. So I don't know if you're having that problem or not, but I haven't heard anybody else having to send back multiple copies of these, like some of the early copies of the UHQRs that were coming out. Now, a lot of people probably didn't rush out to get this one, mainly because there's a lot of other very good versions out there, and it's a classic, so a lot of people might be tired of listening to it, or at least they're looking for something new, and I get that. Especially with these UHQRs, you really want all of your favorite records to be done on them. Some people want more jazz, some people want more rock. Let me know in the comments what your dream UHQR record would be. Like, if you could have anything pressed on UHQR, what would it be? I've thought about this a lot, and I go back and forth on it. At the end of the day, most of the stuff that I probably would like to see, they probably would never do. It's just probably too small or niche for them. But for me, I don't have a ton of copies of this record, and I've not binged on it like I said before. In Felipe's review, he compares it to an OG and the Acoustic Sounds reissue on 33, also done by Ryan K. Smith, and I appreciated hearing him saying that this was a better pressing, and he even said that the Analog Productions 33 was better than the OG that he had. So if you just want to hear this record, there are a lot of really good versions out there that sound great. Kenny's review talks about the digital versions, and I think the consensus here is this UHQR is the one. Like, he feels that this is way more open than those, and I can't really speak to that because I don't have an SACD player or an SACD, but this sounds extremely more open than my blue copy. If you can't afford this, those other options are great, but since there are 10,000 copies of these coming out, maybe save up and get it now. It will go up in price when it goes out of print. Even Acoustic Sounds is selling used UHQRs for a lot more than they were at retail. And the main thing that I'm hearing is probably the 45 RPM difference. But to get a 45 RPM copy of this, you gotta spend like almost $400 or $500. The UHQR stereo of this sounds like Elvin Jones and Coltrane are 5 feet outside of my speakers, and the bass and piano are just beautifully floating in the middle. The blue edition that I had before is still present and sounds good, but it doesn't sound like that. And I've heard people say this before, but again, maybe it's just the 45 RPM edition. And again, like I said, if you want a 45 RPM edition of this, besides this, you're gonna have to pay over $400 for it. I personally feel like we're living in a new golden age of vinyl collecting. I've been collecting for 23 years now, and never before has there been so many options and so many audiophile options, with an emphasis on all analog and great box sets coming out. And I'm telling you, this is a special time, and you need to strike when these things are affordable, or as Chad Kasem says from Analog Productions, buy now or cry later. Now, is a $170 record after tax and shipping affordable? Well, in a world where people don't bat an eye at spending $15,000 on a turntable, it actually kind of is. But I get it, man. I don't make a ton of money, and I would like to get all of these UHQR records, but I have to pick and choose. I'm glad that the Steely Dans are coming out at larger quantities, again, just like this one, so maybe I can save up over time and get them later. Another thing that I personally love about Analog Productions and Chad Kasem, he really wants to get more of this stuff out there and ship it fast. This was announced, and less than 2 weeks later was on my turntable, and that's pretty awesome considering I've pre-ordered and canceled 3 things from Music Direct because MoFi never ships anything. Whatever Chad and his team are doing, it's working, so please keep doing it, guys. One thing to note, I'm so glad that they just put this out straight on 45 RPM and not on 33 and then 45. I kind of wish they didn't do that with the Miles, but maybe this is how they will do it from now on. They'll just put out like a standard Analog Productions 33, which is really good, and then later on a nice 45 UHQR. So I think if you don't own a vinyl copy of A Love Supreme from John Coltrane, why not go and get the best one ever produced? I read in the liner notes for this, what makes a classic is something that's worthy to be passed on to generations. And I feel like these UHQRs are trying to put together something that can be passed on to the future for our well-being and the preservation of this art. These just scream archive and preservation to me. And I now have preserved copies on 45 RPM Clarity vinyl of Miles Davis Kind of Blue and John Coltrane A Love Supreme, as well as others, and this really makes it worth it to me. I'm gonna go listen to this over and over and over again. I will see you guys on the next one. Wait a second.
Hello, my name is Chad Cassom from Acoustic Sounds, Analog Productions, and Quality Record Pressings. This is Ben Blackwell.
Planning for this Elephant 20th anniversary, that it seemed to me like UHQR was the mantle White Blood Cell should be under.
Well, looks like other things are getting fixed in the house this month.